all the schoolboys, they would just say to war, throw up their papers and they strut out. And then, obviously the story goes on and how bad the war is and how it affects all the individuals.
This is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast.
Who took over Czechoslovakia. Not everybody who was there bought into party politics. Just because you were a German in the 1930s and 40s doesn't mean you agreed with Adolf Hitler. Just because you were a Russian in Moscow during communist era doesn't mean that you believed in communism. I had a buddy that went over there and traded a pair of blue jeans. This is in the 80s. Traded a pair of blue jeans for a Russian military jacket. I saw it. I wore it. It's a little small for me. It was the most beautiful jacket I've ever seen in my life. And I said, "You got this for blue jeans?" And he goes, "I got this and a whole lot more for blue jeans." So just to give you an idea of the different freedoms and lack of freedoms they have, where they could be given this military jacket over and over again, but they can't get a pair of blue jeans.
Yeah, and that really goes to that to market economics. And what China's been doing is that they've been allowing market forces and market economies to thrive, but under the control of the Communist Party. They figured it out. They can fund their political missions through their market system economies, or close to market economic systems. The Russians didn't get it. Russians never really had the skill. The Chinese might, and I'm not trying to profile any ethnic group, but the Chinese always seemed to be a little bit more entrepreneurial. Zhou Enlai was one of those guys underneath the Mao Zedong government that understood that you really had to have qualified people to build your industries.
Well, they saw Russia failing.
Yeah, and Russia was a good example of what not to follow and to figure it out. You see this occurring in Vietnam.
And now there's so many people in China, it's like 1.5 billion people. So just the rule of attrition, they can do whatever they want to do. They'll have the best athletes because they have the biggest pool. They'll have the most economic pool because they have all the intellect. And that's it's becoming almost a monopoly. And China, I just heard this statistic the other day. China, there's a place in China called America. All right? Yeah. And they make a lot of goods there. And on the back, it's stamped, "Made in America." Think about that. You want to talk about, if you can separate yourself from the improperness of that, it's really a brilliant marketing move. And they're brilliant people. They really are. It's just, there's too many of them there.
And well, that's shrinking. That's they're one child and only a male child policy is basically having the chickens come home to roost now, and the population's declining. They've had some serious problems with their real estate and
famines,
but basically sort of integral pieces where they try to control things, and they didn't let market or natural instincts, impulses really govern what should have been. They tried to control it, and this is now coming back to bite them. And you still have about half of the population that is still rural. Half of it is really advanced a lot. And to the credit of the Chinese, they're very patient. They persevere.
So trying to control your population sounds a lot like another form of government that happened in the 30s and 40s.
It did, and they didn't have digital ways to control you. They didn't have cameras on every corner. They didn't have the biometrics, the digital tools to really assimilate all this and get the data and the analytics that you need to create the control.
One thing I will say, and we're talking about Nazi Germany because it plays into the story of your father very deeply. Again, if we don't learn from history, we're doomed to repeat it. So I've become a student of World War II, German government at the time, and I look at how they do things. So I know we don't talk about politics on the show, but I am going to say one thing political. While I myself abhor guns, okay, because of what I went through, I believe in people's right to carry a gun. Why do I do that? Because the first thing in 1933, when Adolf Hitler took over, when he just took it. First thing he did with the citizens is he took away the weapons, because now the citizens don't have a chance to defend themselves. That's one of the reasons why the Second Amendment is in the Constitution. It's defense against tyrannical governments, not to shoot each other. And so I look at that, and that's a freedom that we have. So I'm hoping that when did your father pass?
He died in 2002.
He died in 2002. Were you able to sit down with him, other than what you read in his memoirs? Were you able to sit down with him and have a man-to-man talk about some of his experiences during the Second World War?
Yeah, and that started to occur later in his life. And what was sort of the instigation of this all was that as we grew older, we wanted to really capture some of that family history. We were embarrassed by it.
Well, like you said, when you were young and World War II wasn't that far removed,
no, it wasn't.
It's too close to even talk about it. You know, I've said this a couple times on this show. When someone dies, a library burns to the ground. Things like shows like this, things like this book, while some of it is lost to history, not all of it's lost to history anymore. That's the beautiful part about the age that we live in.
No, and we can capture some of it. But basically, I'm not going to say I forced my dad to do it, but it's strongly suggested that he take down some of these memories. And then I found a writer for him. And that's when he started his memoir. And that was probably in the mid-90s or early 90s. And it took a long time. It was excruciatingly slow.
He's a 70-something, 80-year-old man
He's
at the time.
80. He was 92 when he died.
Yeah.
So you can do the math backwards. Sure. So and he was 80 maybe.
So he was born in 1920?
And his memory was good. He was still
10.
sharp.
10?
1909.
1909, okay.
1909. So the idea was to start to put all of this information down, what you could remember. And that's where Julie, last year, about a year and a half ago, she said, let's re-look at this
Takes a
book
long
that he
time to
did,
write a book. I'll be the first to admit that.
and let's try to contemporize it. Don't make it into a history book. Make it into a story. And so that's what was the genesis for that.
So let's go back. When did the Germans invade Czechoslovakia?
1938. That's when they took it over. It became the protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia, and Slovakia became independent.
Well, if I remember correctly, they just walked in.
They did.
Yeah, they didn't. There was really no fighting.
No, that was the Munich Agreement. That was Neville Chamberlain. You go back to peace in our time.
Appeasement,
peace in our time. And that was the door opener for Hitler. And Hitler was, previous to that time, he was doing his land grabbing all around Germany to restore the Third Reich, the empire, the glory of the old Reich, and the legends and the stories, the Wagnerian stuff, everything kind of coalesced there. But it was the Ruhr, it was the Saar Valley, it was encroachments into in support of fascists like in Spain, and then the combination of Hitler and Mussolini, and trying to strengthen those ties of countries that were fascist. And then you had your monarchists in Japan, which were developing an authoritarian type of government as well.
Do you recall his words when Germany first came in? Do you remember, did he say what the feeling was? Was it an ominous feeling? Was it a feeling of joy? Because you got to remember, Germany is a rising power in the world in 1938. Since 1933, they're going up. I think 1933, Hitler was Time Man of the Year. Henry Ford was over there. Charles Lindbergh was over there. There's pictures of them meeting this at the time great leader of the world, who's bringing Germany out of the ashes after the Treaty of Versailles that crushed Germany. So there's all these things going on. And I often wonder that when he comes in, is he seen as a tyrant or is he seen as a savior?
Well, it depends on your constituency because the Czech lands had a very strong German influence. So there were Germans that cheered on Hitler. They thought this was manifest destiny for the German people. And if you can put it into sort of an analogous light, one good example is the Sound of Music and the Von Trapp family, where was everybody against Hitler and the Anschluss of combining Austria to the German Reich? Probably, not. There was probably a lot of happy people there. There was a lot of,
If I had blonde hair and blue eyes, I'd be thrilled to death.
well, it was that Bavarian connection, the strength of the Bavarian stock to the Austrians. And Hitler, don't forget, was born in Austria.
Yes, he was.
And he lived across the river, close in Passau. So he was sort of a Southern German, a Southern Deutsch. And there was always a tension in the Habsburg Empire as well, because Habsburgs were German speaking, and they wanted to promote a German speaking nation in the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
I just want to warn everybody. I finally met somebody who's just as big as a history nerd as I am. I love this stuff. I really do love this stuff on how it happened. Germany comes into Czechoslovakia. What is your father's first recollection of them?
First recollection is, get on your uniform. Let's go. We've got the support. We've got an alliance with France. France will come and defend us. We have.
Was it de Gaulle?
No, it was. I can't remember right now.
Yeah.
It could have been.
No, I'm sorry. I'm thinking
it was
of
the Vichy government. It goes back to
I'm thinking
the
of
old
Spain
general
with
that was
Lissimo Franco. Yeah.
Franco was the dictator there, but France was sort of bifurcated as well, because there were sort of we don't want to go through another world war because we lost so many people in the First World War.
Right.
We paid a big price. If you've been to Verdun,
The trenches are still there.
and the trees are yellow still from all of the lead that was used in the battle there.
There's a fascinating picture. I go through this site called archaeologica.org, and there's a fascinating site. So to this day, 2024, they're building roads in France, and they come across this time capsule. What had happened is a German bomb blew up next to a trench from World War I, and it completely covered the trench with all the occupants inside. They get the archaeologists out there, they start excavating it. They found guns, helmets, newspaper, of course, the soldiers who were there, all perfectly preserved. Well, not perfectly preserved, they're in the ground, but preserved just a moment of time. Literally, the bones, somebody was holding a cup. I mean,
In time.
it's
yeah,
a little
frozen
it's
in
a
time.
little it's a little spooky when you think about it. War from a distance seems great, honorable. War in close up and personal, and we've had a lot of vets in here, including one from D-Day. War up close is horrific. It's traumatic. It is ugly, and it is survival mode all day long.
Yeah, well, you look in the book, and that's really a point that was that we tried to make in it. And Nikki did a great job of
Nikki Pasquarello, sure.
Yeah, she did a great job, and it was take us into the pre-World War I, sort of that bucolic, happy time. People were comfortable. The pull in the community that we lived in Brno, that was more of a Viennese feel than there would be one to Prague, and there was an overlay of Germans that was there. Brno had maybe over a third were German speaking, and there was a strong influence there, especially when you look at the economics of it. And then you go into World War I, and one of the things I never really understood is my grandfather fought for the Kaiser Wilhelm,
yeah.
Wilhelm, and he's born in Prague, was born to and became a German citizen, so he would be drafted by the Kaiser Wilhelm, not Kaiser Franz Josef.
Mm-hmm.
And he went to war, but he didn't like war. He was sort of a I got to go. Maybe, the old joke about, your horse has diabetes. He was trying to find ways to get himself out
Sure.
of that duty. But we had a neighbor, according to my dad's memoir, Marek, who thought this was really great. And if you've seen the old movie of All Quiet on the Western Front, that
Yes.
original movie in the 30s, where all the schoolboys, they would just say to war, throw up their papers and they strut out. And then, obviously the story goes on and how bad the war is and how it affects all the individuals.
The best picture I've ever seen of the result of war is somewhere, I think it's in France. There's a bicycle. Guy rides his bicycle to the draft office, parks his bike by a tree, goes to war, never comes home. That bicycle to this day is encapsulated in that tree. The tree just grew around the bike, so the bike looks like it's sitting in the tree. And
Wow.
if you look at that piece of history and you think, this is a man who rode this bike here 100 years ago, 110 years ago, and never came back to reclaim the bike. That is war.
That is. And, moving on, when they came back from war, there was this period of quiet and tranquility. And then back to your point, in the 30s, when there was this anti-Semitism that was starting to develop, that affected our family. And I want to get that piece of the story into it as well, because my grandmother was Jewish.
So that's one of the things that fascinates me about Nazi Germany is, why do you hate Jewish people so bad? Like, what did they do? And Hitler, so there was a cool story that I just heard about Hitler. Did you ever see the movie Cabaret?
Yeah, several times.
So one of the things Hitler did was he closed down all the cabarets because he had to dehumanize Jewish people. For whatever reason, I don't know his reason. I haven't spoken to him. He's been dead for a long time. But for whatever reason, he really hated the Jews. So the cabarets and the actors and the dancers and all these cabarets were Jewish, most of them. Now, you can't hate somebody that you're going to go see and it's entertaining you, making you laugh, making you feel joyous when you're out. So he closes all the cabarets. And now all of a sudden, these Jewish people, they got to walk around with stars. It's crazy. It's really crazy. What was the Jewish population in Czechoslovakia at the time?
Probably not too much. Too much, maybe 200,000. That would be I'm thinking as a population of Czechoslovakia. That's a combination of the Slovak Republic now and Czechoslovakia, maybe 200,000 out of 8 or 9 million people. But the interesting point is, and I've thought about this quite a bit, is why, to your question, why are Jews hated? Why Hitler picked on the Jews and fomented this anti-Semitism. Sort of the theory I've got is that was brought about by these people who were anti-Semites because they forced the Jews to be successful. They didn't allow them to own property. They limited their ability to participate fully in the economy, in the traditional economy, and they found ways to get into other businesses that nobody else wanted. And guess what? They became successful. And all of a sudden, we're mad at them because we kicked them out and they showed us that they could earn livings and prosper in ways that we didn't even think of.
Bring it to modern day. I'm going to bring
exactly.
I'm going to bring this to modern day again, learning from history. Everybody coming back from World War II, the fathers went to work. They did construction. They did mason work. Italians did brick work. And then you start them. They never wanted their kids to do what they did, right? Mm-hmm. So they sent them off to college. Now you have this flow of college kids who are making peanuts, tons of student loans. Guess who's making the most money? Your masons, your construction workers. They get paid if you go to, so Mike Rowe has the Mike Rowe Foundation. If you go to a trade school, they pay you half pay and you come out and you got a job waiting for you at $75,000 a year. I challenge a college student, the vast majority of college students, I challenge them to get out of college and make $75,000 a year.
We call them the 2%ers. We we realize that, and we've been showing, and part of my efforts locally is to promote junior colleges, and you don't have to be a lawyer or a doctor. Or Carl Icahn, for instance, our corporate takeover genius. Uh, his joke is that my parents wanted me to go to medical school, but I wasn't smart enough, so I had to become a lawyer and then a businessman. So
Yeah, but so that's my era. Everybody was going to law school. So the 50-year-olds out there, when you were in college, there was this big rush to go into law. And then what happened? Everybody went into law, and people were coming out and they're making $60,000, $50,000 with with tons of student loans coming in because the job market was flooded. I don't know whether it's still that way, and I don't have my finger on that pulse. But that's what happened. So learning from history, where the Jews were taking jobs that nobody wanted and finding a way, because there's this equilibrium of life, finding a way to make them successful. And God, you're taking a job nobody wants and you're successful at it and you're making a living at it. And I hate you now. It's so foreign to me.
And you've seen that in the book and the production of Ragtime, where you've got the Jewish actor there who develops motion pictures or products in motion pictures, and that was as the movie business started to develop, it was relatively easy to enter it. Can't do it now because of the production costs that you have, but it was easy to buy a camera, roll some film, dress up a couple of actors, and then sell it to the Goy community, which would go and watch it for entertainment. And they didn't realize they were enriching these people that didn't have access to the traditional trade unions or to the schools. There were bars on entering into prestigious schools, and then finally, that started to melt down, and there was more or less equality in education to all people, all races.
The even the word Juden to this day holds weight. I was just watching this interview with Paul McCartney, and when he wrote the song "Hey Jude," he was in a store, and it was posted up there, "Hey Jude," whatever storefront that he had at the time, and somebody comes by and says, "Hey, you can't put that in there. It's a bad word." Like, he didn't understand. It was about a person. But even back then in the late 60s, he still had a problem with the name Jude 20 years post-war. But so the Jews really got put through hell.